Concept art is the backbone of the visual development of any visual medium. In game development especially, concept art is often used to stir up ideas for the writers and game designers. It's one of the first steps to any game. But it's not just a pre-production tool. It's used throughout the entirety of development to constantly shape ideas and communicate them to the team. In all of my research, I've found that most of the time, the concept art looks way better than the finished product. Why is that? What happens to these games that makes them stray so far from the original idea? My favorite pieces of art are the ones that tell a story. Like this piece of your in-game wife having her baby ripped from her arms. The lighting is harsh, creating a stark contrast and a pleasing rim light outlining the characters. There's a lot of motion, the left side being forced away from the screen and the right side being forced towards it. The figures make it like a Renaissance painting. Take special note of the framing. The actual game has something very different. The circumstances have changed, there's one less person, but not for nothing, this shot is a lot more boring. Why is that? Well, the framing is limited by the first-person camera angle. This isn't technically a cutscene, it's an in-game event. There are no cutscenes in Fallout 4 at all, unless you count the conversations. This helps with immersion, but limits the amount of motion and depth capable. In this scene, each character is confined to their spaces. The animation is limited. This doesn't excuse the lack of dramatic lighting. This scene would actually look sick if the inside of the pod was still just a glowing light. But lighting in games is difficult. Maybe they couldn't get it just right or ran out of time. Or maybe it was never even considered a priority to begin with. Now, this is just one example. Games typically have hundreds of concept illustrations. There's a whole book of these for Fallout. So, why even bother with all of this work if the end result is gonna be so different? In the very early stages of game development, studio heads and sometimes writers will come up with a direction they want to take their game and call in concept artists to flesh out random ideas. They're artists, so they know what looks cool. A consumer's first impression of the game is its visuals. And at the end of the day, these are products to be sold. So the studios trust these artists to stir up some visual ideas with a loose story in mind to serve as a jumping off point. This is something they do for movies too. There's some great pieces from the pre-production of Star Wars Episode 7, including this very primitive lightsaber concept that probably spawned the idea for Kylo Ren's lightsaber. And you might be thinking, wait, that's not Kylo Ren at all. And you'd be correct. Perhaps my favorite story showing the importance of this step of the process is the canceled fourth Jak and Daxter game. They weren't sure if this was going to be a reboot, a sequel, or what, so artists were throwing out some very wacky ideas. The team realized their most interesting work was coming from pieces that stretched beyond the typical cartoony Jak and Daxter aesthetic. Neil Druckmann and Bruce Straley, in their first ever directing roles, asked the execs at Naughty Dog, "Do we really have to stick to doing a Jak and Daxter game?" To their surprise, the execs said, "No, not at all." And from these pieces stemmed The Last of Us of all things. Pre-production art is where the most interesting ideas come from. And so much gets thrown out because each piece is so different from the next. During the pre-production of Fallout 4, artists focused on the important bits. The vault suit, the Pip-Boy, and loose concepts of the environment. Concept art is also used to set the mood and the tone of the game. Part of this is helping visualize key moments to get a feel for what the game will look and feel like. This is where we get the piece of the baby being ripped from his mother. If it was created this early in development, that would explain how it ended up being so different. But to their defense, for pre-pro art, they came pretty damn close. Concept art isn't just used to stir up ideas, it's also used to solidify those ideas. Characters are drawn and iterated upon over and over until the creative director is satisfied. These images are then passed over to the character artist to sculpt the 3D models. Basically, every time they want to add something to the game, be it a different outfit or even, a blender, A concept artist has to design it two-dimensionally first. This is what keeps concept artists busy throughout the duration of the development. There's always something to be added or tweaked. I believe this is where it's most tragic to lose those beautiful nuances of the concept art. At least in the beginning of development, the ideas are so radically different that it's inevitable that things get thrown out. They're still trying to find a visual direction. Late in development, the visual identity should be pretty much nailed down. At this stage, things often get thrown out or changed due to time constraints. Take a look at this concept of a completely vertical homestead. It's possible this was meant to be the central city of Boston, all contained within one skyscraper. This would have been before they came up with the idea of Diamond City. It made it into the game. You can even see it from Diamond City. It's just not accessible. I really do like this idea, but it was probably scrapped due to technical limitations. It would have been difficult to build upwards. And how would your character get there? An elevator? A long staircase? Would they warp there? Would it be a different area altogether, separated from the rest of the world? Ideas like this are great because of how out there they are, unaffected by the constraints of logistics. These goddamn logistics are just ruining everything. There's also something about how story and life is portrayed in these paintings rather than in-game. Maybe it's the stiff character animations, but it almost looks more alive in the still illustrations. And once again, dramatic lighting helps. Make this place look dreary, more mysterious. The final in-game work is missing dynamics that the concept artists weren't afraid to implement. You know, a lot of it is lighting. The Institute is supposed to be this light and clean-looking place. The bright lighting and reflective surfaces really sell this idea. Nothing else in the game is this bright. The in-game area actually comes pretty close. I love the foggy glow from the lighting, indicating that it is really bright in there. But what about the ground and the walls? Even the character designs are made with lots of bright white strokes. What's making them so afraid to push that contrast in-game? Let's up that exposure a little bit. Are they afraid to lose detail? That's ironic, because there's more detail in the concept art. When I'm playing Fallout, I want to feel like this guy. I feel as though it wasn't a priority to faithfully recreate these pieces so much as it was to create the big expansive world as quickly as possible. Then maybe see what details they can go back and toss in. The airport has these atomic age pillars that look like fins. The way the light reflects off the ridges really accents them. It really sells the stylized 1950s look. The airport we get in the game is just flat concrete. This is another logistical constraint. Would it have been worth it to model these structures for just this one location? They're so unique looking that they might not be modular enough. Since the game is so big, a lot of Fallout set pieces were built modularly to be reused elsewhere. Time is so important that everything needed to be thoughtfully constructed. Characters lost some detail too. Look at how much more badass Piper looked. The only real noticeable difference is her short hair. The in-game model has a brighter, slightly less ragged coat. Is that bright burgundy? Ew. Here's a better example of a stylistic change. A lot of Mama Murphy concepts had her in some sort of wheelchair. Since stairs would pose a problem, they decided to try outfitting her with a modified Mr. Handy. The art book claims this was removed because it was distracting, but I'd say it was removed because it would be one hell of a challenge to script. You'd have a character sitting on top of what is essentially another floating character. And how would she interact with the environment? Her Mr. Handy would have to be much lower to the ground in order for her to stay at eye level with other characters. The tragic part here is that her wheelchair, Mr. Handy, or whatever it would have been, carried with it so much of her personality. She could have been such a larger-than-life character. The only remnants of this Mama Murphy that we get in the game is that she just has to sit all the time. But this would have been a hell of a lot of time to implement. You can tell that someone at Bethesda was pushing for this concept hard. Sometimes, sacrifices just have to be made. When it comes down to it, these are all great excuses for the game to be different than the concept art. Games should be as faithful to the original idea as possible, but conform to whatever restrictions they need to in order to actually ship. Done is better than perfect. It's too easy for games like this to get delayed and iterated upon over and over while striving for everything to be just right. I'm just here to bust Bethesda's balls and to show you guys the game that we almost got. It's fun to see how things change during development. But what do you guys think? Is done better than perfect? Would you have liked to have seen a more artistic and stylized Fallout 4? Leave it in the comments below, and if you like this video, you can tell us so by clicking that like button. This video and videos like it are brought to you by our Patreon supporters. Your contributions help more than you know, because at the $3 level, you can watch these videos early, and at the $5 level, you can leave us feedback on the videos. Then we can change them before they make it to the general public. You can also leave me feedback by following me on Twitter @BobWulff. And you could check out the other weekly videos that I do at my YouTube channel, The Wulff Den. Thank you so much for watching. Your view means so much more than any of the other things that I just told you to do right now. And I will see you in another video. Have yourselves a good week.